When did you do these?
At night.
After your homework?
Sometimes.
Is this you?
Yeah.
You've gotten really good.
You think so?
I do.
What if I join the art club?
You don't have time.
It only meets twice a week.
And your streams are every day.
I could stream on the other days.
No.
But I love it.
I know you do. But sometimes we don't get to do what we love.
Why not?
Because we're trying to survive.
Hope can be a beautiful thing, but sometimes it lasts only a few seconds before reality finds a way to steal it again. Standing in the quiet kitchen, Emma watched as her mother slowly turned each page of the sketchbook. Every drawing told a story. The oak tree, the school library, the lonely girl sitting in front of a glowing phone, pieces of Emma's heart carefully hidden in pencil. When Diane finally spoke, it wasn't criticism. It was praise. "You've gotten really good." For one shining moment, Emma's heart soared. Maybe, just maybe, this was the conversation she'd been waiting for. Gathering every ounce of courage she had, she asked the question that had been living inside her for days. "What if I joined the art club?" The hope in her eyes lasted only until Diane answered. No, just one word. Quiet, firm, final. Emma tried to compromise. Twice a week. She could still stream on the other days. She wasn't asking to give up everything. She was only asking for a small piece of her own life. But Diane couldn't see it that way. Sometimes we don't get to do what we love. Those words landed heavily between them. Emma looked down, guilt replacing hope once again. She loved painting. Her mother loved protecting their future. And somehow, those two dreams had become enemies. Later that morning, Noah noticed the sadness on Emma's face before she even said a word. When she explained what had happened, he listened without interrupting. Then he asked something so simple, yet so unexpected. "Have you ever actually seen the debt?" Emma blinked. She searched her memories. Every birthday, every holiday, every conversation about sacrifice. She had heard the words, "we're in debt," countless times, but she had never seen a single bill, never opened a bank statement, never read a collection notice. For the first time, a tiny crack appeared in the story she'd believed all her life. The bell rang through the hallway. Neither of them moved, because sometimes one question can change everything. By lunchtime, fate had another surprise waiting. As Emma walked past the principal's office, familiar voices drifted through the slightly open door. Her mother's voice. Then another sentence stopped her in her tracks. "I heard you finally renewed your nursing license." Emma's heart skipped. Nursing license? Her mother had been a nurse? She stood frozen. How could she have lived her entire life without knowing something so important? Another question quickly followed. If Diane could return to nursing, why hadn't she? Had staying home really been the only option? Or had something else kept her away? The answers slipped away before Emma could hear them. But the certainty she'd always felt was gone. Still overwhelmed, Emma found Noah beneath the oak tree. The words tumbled out before she could organize them. "My mom used to be a nurse." Even Noah looked surprised. As they pieced together everything Emma had learned, one realization became impossible to ignore. The woman who always insisted there was no other choice might have had one all along. Emma lowered her eyes. "I don't even know what's true anymore." Noah didn't rush to fix the problem. He didn't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out 2 chocolate bars. "I don't have answers, but thinking is easier with chocolate." Emma laughed, a real laugh, one that cut through the confusion, even if only for a moment. Sometimes friendship doesn't erase pain. Sometimes it simply reminds us we don't have to carry it alone. Then Emma's phone buzzed. A new notification lit up the screen. Exclusive 6-month brand contract. Not long ago, she would have opened it immediately. She would have wondered how much money it offered, how many more hours she'd have to spend smiling for strangers. But this time, she simply looked at the notification and locked her phone because something inside her had begun to change. For the first time, the value of her future no longer depended on the number written inside a sponsorship offer. It depended on discovering the truth about her mother, the truth about the debt, and perhaps the truth about the life she was never given the chance to choose. But if Diane really could return to nursing, Then why was she still keeping Emma tied to the camera? And what else had she been hiding all these years? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Sometimes, the biggest battles don't begin with shouting. They begin with one quiet question. When Emma walked through the apartment door that Thursday afternoon, she expected another ordinary evening, another live stream, another schedule, another performance. Instead, she found her mother smiling brighter than she had in months. An email glowed across the laptop screen, an exclusive 6-month creator contract. To Diane, it wasn't just another business deal, it was security, success, proof that every sacrifice had been worth it. She imagined bigger sponsors, more viewers, a brighter future, but when she looked at Emma, she didn't see excitement, she saw silence. Then came the question she never expected to hear. What if I don't sign it? The room seemed to stop breathing. For the first time, Emma wasn't asking for a shorter stream or time to paint. She was questioning the future that had already been planned for her. Diane searched for the right words, but some questions can't be answered immediately, especially when they force us to confront the choices we've made. Upstairs, Emma searched for answers of her own, not on the internet, not in livestream comments, but inside an old family photo album. Each page carried memories from a life that felt strangely unfamiliar. Birthday candles, family vacations, Christmas mornings. Then, a photograph changed everything. There stood Diane in blue hospital scrubs, smiling proudly beside her co-workers. On the back, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "First week at St. Andrew's Medical Center. I finally got my dream job." Emma gently traced the faded ink. Dream job. Her mother had once had a dream too. Another picture slipped onto the floor. A younger Diane stood outside the hospital, holding little Emma in her arms, both of them smiling. Not the practiced smile Emma wore online, not the determined smile Diane wore while negotiating sponsorships. Real smiles, the kind that come from a life that still belongs to you. Holding the photograph against her chest, Emma whispered the question neither picture could answer. What happened to us? That evening, dinner sat untouched between them. Neither of them seemed hungry. Emma finally asked the question she'd been carrying all day. "Were you happy as a nurse?" Diane froze. Because happiness is difficult to talk about when you've spent years convincing yourself that sacrifice was enough. Finally, she admitted the truth. "I was." Emma listened carefully. She learned that her mother hadn't been forced to leave nursing. She had chosen to. When Emma's videos began attracting attention, Diane believed she had found a better future for them both. She truly believed she was doing the right thing. Then, Emma quietly asked the question that shattered every justification. "Did you ask me what was best for me?" Silence answered first. Sometimes, silence is the loudest confession of all. Later that night, Noah's message appeared like a small light in the darkness. He invited Emma for a simple walk after school. Nothing extraordinary, just two friends spending time together. Emma already knew what her mother's answer would be. No. Still, Noah encouraged her to ask anyway. If you never ask, she'll never have the chance to say yes. The next day confirmed Emma's fears. Her mother refused. Again. Yet somehow, beneath the old oak tree, disappointment became laughter. Noah had a way of making heavy moments feel lighter. Then he asked one final question. "When you're 80 years old, what will you remember?" Emma imagined her future. Would she remember livestream number 300, number 700, number 1000? Probably not. But she knew exactly which memories she would regret, the moments she almost lived, but never allowed herself to. School ended. Students hurried home. Time, as always, refused to slow down. Then, Noah reached into his backpack. Inside was a small package wrapped in brown paper. Emma carefully unwrapped it. A watercolor paint set. Old, worn, clearly loved. It wasn't expensive, but some gifts are priceless because of what they represent. Noah smiled. "It was my first paint set." Then he gently placed it into Emma's hands. "It helped me remember who I was." His words settled deep inside her heart, because he wasn't really giving away paint. He was handing Emma permission to believe that her own dream still mattered. As Emma hugged the little paint set to her chest, another pair of eyes watched everything from across the parking lot. Diane. For years, she had given Emma opportunities, schedules, success, security. But standing there behind the windshield, She witnessed someone give her daughter something she hadn't been able to provide: hope. Emma smiled as she walked toward the car. Not the smile practiced under ring lights, not the smile sponsors paid for, a genuine smile. And instead of feeling proud, Diane felt something she hadn't expected in a very long time: guilt, because for the first time, she couldn't ignore the painful possibility that the life she'd worked so hard to build for her daughter might be the very thing stealing her daughter's happiness. Sometimes, the truth doesn't arrive all at once. It comes one sentence at a time, one question at a time, until there's nowhere left to hide. As Diane drove away from the school, she couldn't stop thinking about the gift Noah had placed in Emma's hands: a simple watercolor paint set. Old, well-used, worth very little to anyone else. But to Emma, it meant everything. When Diane asked about it, Emma answered with quiet honesty: "He listens." Only 2 words, yet they echoed louder than any argument, because Diane suddenly realized something painful. She had spent years making sure the world listened to Emma, without remembering to listen to Emma herself. That evening, everything was prepared for another live stream. The ring lights glowed. The camera waited. The phone stood ready. It looked exactly like every other streaming day, except Emma never sat down. Instead, she took a deep breath and quietly said the words she'd been too afraid to speak for years: "I don't want to stream today." At first, Diane thought she had misunderstood. Then she searched for another explanation. Maybe Emma was sick. Maybe she had a fever. Anything but the truth. But the truth remained standing right in front of her. Emma wasn't ill. She was exhausted. Not in her body, in her soul. She wasn't asking to quit forever. She wasn't asking to throw everything away. She only wanted one evening. Just one. One evening that belonged to her. But even that felt impossible. Then, something inside Emma finally broke. Years of swallowed feelings spilled out all at once. "When was the last time you asked me if I was happy?" The question struck harder than any accusation. Emma listed everything her mother always remembered: homework, the camera, the schedule, the sponsors, everything. Except the one thing that mattered most. "You never ask if I'm okay." There are moments when children stop speaking like children, when pain forces them to sound older than they should. This was one of those moments. Emma admitted the truth she'd hidden behind thousands of live streams: "I smile for strangers every day." Then came the sentence that shattered Diane's heart: "I don't even remember the last time I smiled because I wanted to." Diane insisted she had only been trying to protect her daughter. Emma looked at her with tears in her eyes. From what? Then came the question that neither of them was prepared to answer. "My own life?" The words hung in the air long after they were spoken. As Emma walked away, Diane followed. Not as a manager, not as someone negotiating another sponsorship, but as a mother terrified of losing her daughter. She spoke about sacrifice, about everything she'd worked for. Emma listened, then quietly answered with words that changed everything. "You've been working on my dream instead of yours." Diane froze. For years, she had buried the memory of the woman she used to be, the nurse who once rushed into hospital rooms with hope in her heart, the young mother who believed she could build a future through the career she loved. Looking at an old family photograph, she barely recognized herself. Then, for the first time in years, the whole truth came pouring out. When Emma's father walked away, fear took his place. Fear of raising a child alone, fear of not having enough, fear of failing. Then Emma's videos became popular. The money arrived. The opportunities grew. Diane convinced herself it was temporary. Just for a little while. Just until life became easier. But temporary slowly became permanent. 5 years slipped away. 5 years of live streams. 5 years away from the hospital. 5 years away from the dream she'd once celebrated with pride. When Emma quietly reminded her that she could have gone back, Diane finally admitted the truth she'd been hiding even from herself. "I was afraid. Not afraid of hard work. Not afraid of nursing. Afraid of failing." Emma gently squeezed her mother's hand, then whispered the heartbreaking realization: "You taught me to be afraid too." Those words carried generations of pain inside them, because fear, when left unchallenged, has a way of becoming an inheritance. The room grew silent once more, but Emma still had one final question that had haunted her ever since Noah asked it. "Are we really in debt?" Diane's face lost all its color. She couldn't answer. She couldn't look at her daughter. She couldn't even pretend anymore. Sometimes, silence reveals the truth more clearly than words ever could. Then, through uncontrollable tears, she whispered the only words she had left. "I'm so sorry." In that moment, Emma realized the burden she'd carried for years might never have been what she believed. But if the debt wasn't the whole truth, then what had all those years of sacrifice really been for? And after everything that had just been revealed, could a mother and daughter ever find their way back to each other? Some truths don't just break trust. They break childhood. The apartment had never felt so quiet. No cameras, no ring lights, no cheerful greetings for strangers, only a mother and daughter standing in the wreckage of years that could never be returned. Emma looked at the woman she had trusted more than anyone else, the woman whose words had shaped every choice she'd made. Then, with a voice barely strong enough to carry the weight of her heartbreak, she whispered, "You lied." There was no denial, no excuses, no attempt to rewrite the past, only one painful confession. "I did." Years of guilt came rushing back all at once. Every birthday she had cut short because of another live stream. Every evening she had chosen work over friends. Every dream she had quietly buried because she believed her family depended on her. She had sacrificed her childhood for a debt that never existed. When Emma cried out, "You made me feel guilty for wanting to be a kid," those words echoed through every corner of the apartment. They weren't just spoken to Diane. They were spoken for every child who has ever carried a burden that never should have been theirs. Diane had no defense left. No explanation could return the years Emma had lost. No apology could erase the fear she'd planted in her daughter's heart. So she did the only thing she could. She admitted the truth. "I don't have an excuse." Sometimes, the hardest sentence a parent will ever say is also the most honest. Unable to bear another moment, Emma quietly walked away. Not because she hated her mother, because her heart simply didn't know how to carry any more pain. Behind the safety of her bedroom door, everything she had held together for years finally fell apart. She cried the tears she'd swallowed through countless live streams, the tears hidden behind practiced smiles, the tears no audience had ever been allowed to see. Then her phone rang. It was Noah. The moment he saw her face, he knew. He didn't ask why she looked tired. He didn't tell her to smile. He simply asked, "Have you been crying?" Emma tried to stay strong. She couldn't. With trembling words, she told him the truth. She lied. Then came the sentence that revealed just how much had been stolen from her. "I gave up everything," for something that wasn't even true. Noah didn't rush to solve the problem. He didn't offer impossible promises. Instead, he gave Emma something she desperately needed: permission to hurt. You don't have to decide tonight. Tonight, just let yourself feel hurt. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with finding answers. Sometimes it begins by allowing ourselves to stop pretending we're okay. Alone in the darkened living room, Diane faced something she had avoided for years: old family photographs. One showed little Emma covered in finger paint, laughing so hard she could barely stand. Another showed the beginning of Emma's online career. The smiles looked similar, but Diane could finally see what she'd missed. One smile was freedom, the other was performance. Holding those two photographs side by side, the truth became impossible to escape. Somewhere along the way, she had mistaken success for happiness. She had confused protection with control. She had believed she was building her daughter a future, while quietly taking away the childhood she could never replace. With tears filling her eyes, she whispered the question she wished she had asked herself years ago. "What have I done?" Late that night, Diane stood outside Emma's bedroom door. Not as a manager, not as someone chasing sponsorships, just a mother hoping her daughter would still listen. She remembered the little girl who loved butterflies, the little artist who happily covered herself in paint without caring about the mess. As she spoke, Emma smiled through tears, remembering those beautiful moments she'd almost forgotten. Then, Diane finally found the words her daughter had needed to hear all along. "I kept telling myself I was giving you a better future." Her voice broke beneath the weight of regret. "I never realized I was taking away your present." There was no request for instant forgiveness, no expectation that everything would suddenly be okay. Only one humble plea. "I'm asking for one chance to become the mother you deserved." Inside the room, Emma reached toward the doorknob. She wanted to open it. She wanted to run into her mother's arms. She wanted the pain to disappear. But healing doesn't happen in a single moment. Trust isn't rebuilt with one apology. So instead, she placed her hand against the closed door. On the other side, without knowing, Diane did exactly the same. A thin piece of wood separated them. But for the first time in years, there were no cameras, no audiences, no expectations, only a mother, only a daughter, and a quiet hope that love, though deeply wounded, might still be strong enough to find its way home. Sometimes, the first sign that life is changing is silence. When Emma stepped out of her bedroom that Saturday morning, something felt different. The apartment wasn't glowing with ring lights. There were no cameras waiting, no countdown to another live stream. The room that had once controlled her life was empty. For a long moment, Emma simply stood there, almost afraid to believe what she was seeing. Then she found her mother sitting quietly at the dining table. No business clothes, no laptop, no sponsorship emails, just a tired woman whose tears had washed away the mask she'd worn for years. When Diane quietly said she had canceled the weekend's live streams, Emma didn't know whether to feel relieved or afraid to hope again. Because trust, once broken, doesn't return overnight. It returns one choice at a time. Later that morning, Diane took Emma somewhere she never expected: the bank. For years, Emma had believed every live stream was keeping them alive. Every smile, every sponsorship, every sacrifice. She thought the money had disappeared into bills she never questioned. Instead, a different truth waited inside a simple folder. Every dollar you earned belongs to you. Emma could hardly breathe. The savings, the investments, years of careful planning, none of it had been spent. Her mother hadn't stolen her money. She had stolen something far more precious: time, childhood, freedom. With tears in her eyes, Diane finally admitted the truth she'd carried for far too long. I convinced myself I was protecting your future while I was stealing your childhood. Some apologies change nothing. Others become the first step toward changing everything. As Diane signed the final papers creating a trust in Emma's name, she wasn't simply transferring money. She was giving her daughter something she should have had from the very beginning: choice. And with one final promise: no more secrets. A new chapter quietly began. A few days later, another door opened, one that had been waiting for 5 long years. Standing outside the hospital, Diane clutched her nursing license with nervous hands. The dream she had abandoned wasn't gone. It had simply been waiting for her to find the courage to come home. Welcome back. Those 2 words meant more than a new job. They meant forgiveness. Not from Emma, from herself. At school, Noah noticed the difference before Emma even spoke. Her smile had changed. It no longer looked rehearsed. It no longer asked for approval. It simply existed. When she told him the streams had stopped and her mother had returned to nursing, Noah smiled with quiet relief. Emma wasn't ready to say everything had been fixed. She wasn't ready to pretend years of pain had disappeared. Instead, she spoke with the honesty she'd finally learned to embrace. "I don't know if I've forgiven her yet." Then she smiled softly. "But I think she's finally telling me the truth." Noah nodded. Because real healing doesn't happen in one conversation. It happens one honest day at a time. That afternoon, Emma stood outside the art room once again. The same doorway, the same smell of fresh paint, the same fear. Only one thing had changed. This time, no one was stopping her. With Noah's old paint set held gently in her hands, Emma stepped inside. No cameras followed. No comments filled the air. No one expected her to perform. There was only a blank canvas, waiting patiently. For the first time in years, Emma wasn't creating content. She was creating herself. 1 year later, that frightened girl stood inside a crowded art gallery, not as an influencer, not as an internet celebrity, but as an artist. As the silk cloth slipped away, the room fell silent. The painting told the story words never fully could. A little girl trapped behind a glowing screen. Another little girl standing beneath an open sky with a paintbrush in her hand. And between them, a mother. Not blocking the path, not controlling it, simply opening the gate. Diane looked at the painting through tears. She finally understood. This wasn't a story about guilt. It wasn't a story about mistakes. It was a story about what love becomes. When it finally lets go of fear. When Diane whispered, "It's beautiful," Emma looked at the painting one last time before answering with quiet peace. It isn't about what happened. She turned toward her mother. It's about what happened after. Because the most beautiful stories are not about people who never fall. They're about people who find the courage to stand again. This time, when Diane wrapped her daughter in a hug, Emma hugged her back. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because forgiveness, like trust, is a choice. And sometimes, choosing to begin again is the greatest masterpiece we will ever create. The end.